Today we begin a new book of the 5 books of the Torah, and it's Bamidbar, which means in the desert. And the Torah was given in the desert, right? Mount Sinai was in the desert. So today we're going to discuss a few very interesting ideas. One, why was the Torah given in the desert? Why couldn't God just transport the Jewish people from Egypt and quickly and get them into the land of Israel? Why did they have to stop at the desert, at Mount Sinai, get the Torah, and then eventually make their way to the land of Israel? So does anybody have any insight? Why have the desert? I mean, they did need to travel, of course, that we know. But why in the
to
desert?
to get rid of this slave mentality.
Very good. Excellent. So we discussed that you could take a slave out of Egypt, but you can't take slavery out of the slave. They had to work it out. Very good. Any other insights?
The land wasn't ready for them,
Okay, possibly.
but yeah, they still cultivated it when they got there. So
Yeah. So the significance, it's very significant that the Torah was given in a desert, in a barren, infertile place, not in a beautiful garden. Like when you have a wedding, you want the chuppah in a beautiful garden or overlooking the ocean. You want atmosphere. You want aura. The Torah is given in a very, there's no scenery. There's no beauty there's beauty, but not in this traditional sense. And the question is, does truth define you or you define truth? Do you define the Torah or does the Torah define you? In other words, sometimes let's say, go to art class, and correct me if I'm right, we have a few artists here, and they tell you to draw a piece of art. And they don't give you any sample. You have to draw it from your imagination. If somebody were to give you a beautiful piece of art and say, copy this piece of art, it's very hard now to draw something original because you've already seen another piece of art. It's not an empty tapestry. Your mind already has adapted and say, oh, my piece has to look like that. So when the Jewish people came out of Egypt, God wanted a clean slate with them. No preconceived notions, no outside influences, no one else's art. I'm giving you an empty tapestry. I'm going to give you a Torah. No one can come and say, the Torah was given on my land. I own the Torah. The Torah was given on my country. Therefore, I define the Torah because it's in my country. It's my rules. Is given in a place that no one can say, I own this land. It's mine. So when the Jewish people had nowhere to look, there's nothing to see, and God gives them a Torah, now it's up to them to take the Torah and bring it into their lives and our lives. There's no predefined picture, tapestry, sculpture, concept, territory where you have to adapt to somebody else because it's their land, their place, their ideas, their rules. So the desert created an empty slate, an empty canvas for the Jewish nation to take the Torah and take it as their own. And no one could later claim, this was my place. I own this land. I own this land. I own the Torah. The Torah was given on my land. So that's why the God chose the desert as a place to give the Torah. And like Diane mentioned, also they just came out of Egypt. They needed a time sort of to have a little solace, a little peace and quiet, a honeymoon period. Everything was provided for them. and then go into the land where you have to cultivate the land, you have to set up businesses, you have to set up stores, you have to set up a government, you have to set up the constitution, you have to set up a police force, a fire department. You're settling a country, it's not so simple. So the desert experience where everything was provided for them, the laundromat, the food, the water, anything, protection, gave the Jews an opportunity to go into the Torah, accept the Torah, start practicing the Torah, and then when they get to the land of Israel, is a little bit of a honeymoon period before you're going into the nitty-gritty of relationships and real life hits you. You have to make a living, you have to pay your rent, you have to send your children to school.
But it
So,
also teaches
yes,
us how to live the
yeah,
life.
exactly, exactly, exactly. It's like a newlywed couple. Many times the first year or so, sometimes the parents pay the rent or pay the bills so that the couple could not have to worry every second before they're ready to make a living. Let's say he just came out of college or yeshiva, she just started her job till they get themselves on their feet. So the desert afforded the Jewish people a transition from a life of horrific slavery to a life of freedom, freedom to serve God and through the precepts of the Torah. So that's the story of the desert. And also, one more point is again what I said, that do we adapt the Torah to us or we adapt ourselves to Torah? And we're going to talk about it soon a little bit more. In other words, many times religious leaders today, let's say, listen, I can't tell my congregation to keep Shabbos. They're all hedge fund managers, financiers, they own shops, they own stores, they own businesses. They can't close shop on Shabbos. I can't tell them Shabbos. I also don't want to talk to them too much about kosher. Listen, food is healthy now. Food is clean. Why do I need to talk to them about kosher? So they adapt a feel-good religion. We adapt Torah to us instead of, we adapt yes, we change Torah for our benefit instead of adapting to Torah and saying, this is what God wanted, this is how we should do it. To the feel-good syndrome, make ourselves feel better, because this is what we need in America today. And we know that we see that it doesn't work that way. Once you start changing things and picking and choosing, the whole foundation of Torah falls apart because this I'll do, this I don't believe in. This is good for me, this is not so good for me. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not all or nothing. It means your attitude has been like, not yet, I'm not ready yet for that mitzvah. But don't say it's not applicable to me, or it's not applicable to my family, or it's not applicable to the world anymore. It is, you may not be ready to do it, but again, you don't adapt the Torah to your way of life, you adapt your way of life to the Torah. That's when it works. That's the secret of the Torah. So the desert is not predefined. The only thing you had is the words of God in the desert. You didn't have to start thinking, does the Torah fit into my lifestyle? What lifestyle? In the desert? So that's the idea of the desert. It's barrenness, is emptiness, is like an empty canvas. You can now create your beautiful tapestry of your life based on the wisdom of God, which is the Torah. Because the Torah, if you want to sum it up, it's God's wisdom. That's what it is. God's infinite wisdom given to us as a gift. Does anybody have any questions?
But it's also the storyline.
Yes. The Torah is also the history of the Jewish people, the history of the world. Yeah.
And within that telling of the story, there are the rules to follow.
Yeah, it says the Shivim Panim La Torah. The Torah has 70 dimensions, even more. What does it mean? Yes, why? You have the history, you have the mitzvahs, you have the traditions, you have so many dimensions now, the Kabbalah. You have so many dimensions to the Torah that you could study it forever, because every time you uncover one layer, another layer appears. And that's why always I try to give you the outer layer and then go a little deeper for the inner layer. So you get a little bit more of the, like we say, the harmony of the music.
And that it's written in Hebrew.
Yes.
I mean, how many people learn besides Israelis Hebrew?
That's why also now it's been translated to make it for everybody can now read Torah. There's no reason not to. There's in English, it's in French, Chinese, every language, the Torah, the authentic Torah has been translated. So nowadays, you can't say, well, I don't read Hebrew, it's not for me. Everything's been translated. The commentaries, the Talmud, the Mishnah, the Code of Jewish Law, all the different parts of Torah, the oral tradition and the written tradition have now been translated, even online. You need to look up a word. You go online, Safaria, you can look up any word and where it's found. It's magnificent what's going on. The digital libraries are just so massive right now. So,
but yet it's the story that's hard to understand. I guess maybe that's why we're always dissecting it.
The story, that's why I say you can't only read the Torah, you have to study the Torah, because so many of the stories are misunderstood. Why? Because we're human beings. We look at a story and we look at it from our limited viewpoint. The way I grew up, my prejudices, my dislike or like, I'll look at a story and define it by how I live. You'll look at it and define it how you live. So if you don't study it, you'll get the wrong story. Now remember, if God wrote the Torah, God could have doctored out the Torah, taken out all the controversial stories.
But
Why
it's so
make
tedious. It's so tedious and it's so precise and it's so, you have to follow it. It's hard to understand.
right? So that's why you do slowly but surely. Slowly but surely, like you teach yoga. The first time someone does yoga, they can barely stretch their arm if they haven't stretched in 20 years. Slowly, you stretch, 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 and now your arm stretches further. Bend, 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 and now you're able to bend. The same thing with Torah study. The brain gets trained. It's very interesting. I was many years ago when I moved to Connecticut, I was asked to debate a feminist on Judaism. Very good. I spoke about feminism. She spoke about feminism. And like 10 women from the Torah class came to support me at this lecture. And one woman was asking all these questions about feminism. Why is there separate seating in the synagogue? Are women second-class citizens? And all the questions. And I noticed the faces of the 10 women that were there to support me. They were smiling because they had those questions a year ago. And now they were answering her. I didn't even have to answer the questions. They were like, I'll explain that to you. I'll explain that to you. So it's beautiful to see how when you study, you become the one with the answers. So it's exercising your brain to think in a different way.
It's true. The same thing with the Psalms.
Yeah.
They were so uncomfortable for me to recite the words.
Why?
Because they were too regal. I just couldn't, I didn't understand it. And then as the years progressed, time and time again, reading them 30 years later, now I cherish all the words and I could really digest it and bring it in and understand it, where I remember I couldn't, the words were just too regal, too holy, too auspicious.
Yeah, when you study Shakespeare in high school, especially elementary school, also you can't figure out this English. You need cliff notes. By the end of Shakespeare, you realize it's a very rich, he was a brilliant writer, right? So it's the same idea that when you want to study even contemporary or poetry, you have to analyze what the poets are saying. The Raven, Edgar Allan Poe, and all the famous poets. They wrote brilliant poetry, but you needed your literature teacher to help you analyze what is the road not taken, right? By Robert Frost. All these beautiful poems, you need to sit and analyze what did the poet mean and so
It's
on.
like another language. It's really
Yeah,
another language.
poetry is another language.
And
I
so
love
are the
poetry.
Psalms.
So the Psalms are really poetry written by King David. And if you really get into it, he had some very, very tough times in his life. He was in the abyss. He was in darkness. He was King David. We're going to learn about him with Rus, because remember, he's the great great grandson of Rus from the book of Rus, the convert.
Thank you so much for putting that together, because now I can really understand.
Yeah, you have to see also who was the author of the poem. When you find the author, you sometimes get an insight. Oh, now I understand. It's a man who suffered. It's a man who had a very difficult life. And then you realize what he's writing. One of the great rabbis that Tzemach Tzedek, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, said that if you sat and read Psalms day and night, your life would be transported, because the Psalms open up the gates of heaven. It has a certain power. The words of King David. That's why Shabbos in the prayers, so many Psalms. Everything, it comes from the Psalms of King David. It's a very powerful, powerful thing.
And saying the Psalms for the hostages from October 7th
Yeah.
was also very empowering, that we were able to do something.
Exactly. You feel like you have something you could do. So there's a very famous story of this in the Talmud, of this Sadducee. He saw Rava, who was a Talmudic sage, and he said, you're such a rash people. God asks you if you want a Torah, and what do you say? Na'aseh v'nishma. We'll do it, and then you can tell us what to do. Like somebody comes to you and says they want to sell you a property or a business. And what do you say to the person? Okay, I'll buy it. I'll buy it. Now, what do you mean you're going to buy it? You're not going to look if it makes money. You're not going to look if it has any issues. You're just going to buy it. So Rav says to him, you don't understand. We walked into it with our whole being, that a relationship with God is not about, God, tell me what I'll get out of it, then I'll do it. When God says to you, do you want my Torah? The whole relationship is not based on the balance sheet. Is the property making money? Is it worth it? Is my investment going to be worth this? The whole power of Torah is God, yes, give us the Torah. We'll do the Torah. Then you can explain to us the benefits of the Torah. So it's not like I'm coming to you to sell you a business. It's God giving us something. When God gives it, it's for your benefit. So he says, if you're going to look at it from like a business deal, you're right. You don't buy a business without investigating the balance sheet and the pros and the cons. And the Torah, the whole power is, again, do we define God or on our terms, or does God define us? That's the secret of Torah. The God defines us. It's on God's term. That's what Torah is. If you start defining everything on your terms, I doubt that we would continue following anything in the Torah, because a lot of times it doesn't make sense, or it's not convenient, or I'm having a bad day. Why should I do it? I'm having a bad day. So again, we don't define God. We don't define Torah. God and Torah define us. It's on God's terms. That's the desert. That's the secret. There's nothing else. We can focus on what is the meaning behind Torah and our relationship with God. It's the honeymoon period. You're getting married. You go to an idyllic place. There's no pressures. There's no stress. No one is calling you. Your mother is not criticizing you. And you can focus on your relationship with God. That's the desert. It's an oasis before real life hits you. Go ahead, Debbie. You wanted to say something?
But then it's constantly still making the right decisions to be try to follow better
Yes.
the rules of the Torah. It keeps
Yes.
you in line. It keeps you morally sound to
Yeah.
value yourself.
Living life as a Jew,
Yes.
living life as a human being, as a mensch, takes effort. If you want to live a life that you will look back at and say, I lived a good life, I tried my best, it takes effort. Any success takes effort. Anything you do takes effort. Beautiful art, beautiful
Right. Yeah. No.
poetry, everything takes effort. Success, many times it could fall in your lap. There are miracles, but success takes hard work. And being a mensch takes hard work. You know,
It's like a diligence,
yeah,
really. And
of personality. Yeah,
and it's a great, it's the ritual of life because it really keeps you on the path.
yeah, yeah. So
But
now, as
I
we put, yeah, sorry,
no,
somebody
I
want,
just think it gives you perspective. Someone cuts you off, you're angry. Maybe they're having an emergency. Maybe they're having a bad day. And
yeah,
it kind of brings you to a higher level of thinking, and it's better that way.
yeah,
That's beautiful. That's really because that's putting it to work, even in your consciousness.
yeah. I was listening to this podcast. It's a guy, Jefferson Fisher. He's an attorney. He's a litigator. And he gives you all scenarios how to respond. Someone insults you. What do you say? Someone's a narcissist. How do you deal with them? So last night I was rummaging through the podcast, and he says, and somebody insults you. What do you say? He says to the guy who's interviewing him, silence. You say nothing. You have to let the person realize they just insulted you. You don't have to respond. You're silent. And then he tells you what to say. One of the things he says, did you mean to say that to me? Like he has good lines. The problem is I never remember his lines. But anyway, he has good lines. So he says how to be in
I
life, how
like
to
that
deal with
too.
all these crazy situations. He says, someone will put you down all
Sometimes
the
he says that's a shame
time.
that you would say that you would
Oh,
say
very
that.
good,
That's
very
really a
good.
shame
Yeah,
that you felt the need to say that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's a good one.
right. That's also a good one. Yeah, that's a shame that you felt that you had to go there. So as we move into the Torah portion, it talks about counting, how God counted the Jewish people. They had to bring the shekel, but there was one tribe that was counted separately. Who knows which tribe was not counted with the general population of the Jewish people? The tribe of Levi.
Why?
I'm going to explain. Now, there's 12 tribes, and the tribe of Levi is the tribe, which is Aaron, came from it, the high priest, Moses' older brother. They were the Kohanim and the Leviim. So if you're a Kohen or a Levi now, you come from Aaron. That's your tribe. You're coming from Aaron, which is the tribe of Levi. What happened was God entrusted that who would work in the Beit HaMikdash initially? The firstborn sons. The firstborn, the Bechar, would be given the gift of working and being in the Holy Temple. They would be the Jewish priests. Now came the sin of the golden calf. And the Jewish people from all the tribes participated, except the women, in the sin of the golden calf. They created a golden calf when Moshe went up on the mountain to bring down the 10 Commandments after the giving of the Torah. Whose tribe did not participate in the sin of the golden calf?
Leviv.
The tribe of Levi. So God said, now the honor and the gift of serving in the holy temple will be given to the tribe of Levi. There will be
Oh.
the Kohanim from the tribe of Levi, which was Aaron's family, and then from the three children of Levi, they will be the Levites in the holy temple, because there's two categories, the Kohanim and the Levites. They each had their responsibilities. So one of the Rebbes, I forgot, not Chabad Rebbe, asked the question, why only 3,000 of the Jewish people, men, participate in the sin of the golden calf? Surely you can't hold everyone accountable, right? Why are you holding them all accountable? Some of them didn't participate in the golden calf. And what's the answer? Is that they may not have participated in the sin of the golden calf, but they remained silent with the sin of the golden calf. And what does this mean exactly? That when Moshe came down from the mountain and saw the horrific sin that they committed by creating an idol, 40 days after receiving the Torah, the terrible travesty, they betrayed their spouse, they cheated on their spouse with a foreign idol. Moshe called out and said, "Who is with me? Who is with God?" And of course, the tribe of Levi came over, but none of the other people came over. They stood silent. In other words, silence in the face of a tragedy is a crime all of its own. If somebody is bullying somebody and you didn't intervene, that's one thing. But that you stood by and didn't say anything, that's also a crime. To watch a crime being committed and not saying anything is also a crime. Silence is a crime. Now, well, can you be arrested for that? No, because you didn't do the bullying. You just watched the bullying. You didn't do the sin of the golden calf, but you watched the golden calf. And when Moshe comes down and says, "Who in my nation is with me?" and you don't go and stand near Moshe and say, "We're against the golden calf," that's also a crime. So it wasn't only that the Levites didn't participate in the sin of the golden calf. When Moshe said, "Who is with God? Come near me," they ran to Moshe and said, "We're with you. We will fight for this." And some of them who did oppose the golden calf were killed. They were murdered by the people who created the golden calf. They said, "You don't have a right to interfere with us making a calf." And they slaughtered those people. That's why Aaron didn't oppose them openly, because he knew they would kill him too. So silence, the Torah is telling us, is also terrible. You know, there's a famous story in Chicago. I don't know if you remember, I wrote it down. In 1998, there was a 15-year-old boy. His name was Christopher Searcy. And he was shot twice in the chest while playing basketball on the playground. And he was a few blocks away from the Ravenswood Hospital. Terrible story. I don't know if you remember it. So when his friends saw he was shot by some kind of gang shooting, they started to schlep him to the hospital. And right outside of the hospital, they couldn't anymore, and he collapsed, bleeding out. So they ran into the hospital and they said, "Please, please, our friend is outside bleeding out on the sidewalk. You got to help him. He was shot." And they said hospital rules were not permitted to treat anyone outside of the hospital doors. They said, "He's right outside. Bring him in." They said, "We cannot do that. It's against hospital policy." So they quickly called 911, and the police came. And by the time the policeman came and lifted him up to bring him in, he had died. Silence in the face of tragedy is a crime. Now, could they be indicted? No, because they followed hospital policy. And then because of this story, they changed hospital policy. But could you imagine that no one was a good Samaritan, could go out and say, "I don't care about hospital policy. I'm going to save a life"? They didn't. And this shows you by the Cheta Ego that they didn't participate. Good for you. But when Moshe calls out, "Who's with me? Who's with God?" they also just stood there. They didn't want to align themselves. They were scared. Maybe that's not the right team. I want to be on this team. I don't know yet. I'm like, okay. And that's why Levi is rewarded. And the Bechorim lose their privilege of serving the temple. And I don't know if you remember also with the story with Sandy Hook, the terrible story of a nurse, two babies. She was driving to bring her children to daycare so she could go to work. And the Sandy Hook waves hit her car, and the car went off on the side. And by a miracle, she grabbed out her two children. She was also a fantastic swimmer, and she was holding them and struggling to stay afloat. And she finally made her way over to this house that was like high up. And she knocked on the door. Please let me in. We're going to be swept away in a few seconds. And the owner of the house said, I don't know you. I'm not letting you into the house.
Oh.
So she ran to the back of the house and tried to break into the window to save her two babies. And they were swept away. And they were later found gone, drowned. And again, they couldn't indict the man for not opening the door. He was saved. But silence is a tragedy. You don't want to get involved, but you're saving a life here. So can you be indicted for being silent? No. Can they arrest this man and say, how come you'd open the door? He said, well, I don't know. Maybe she was a thief. Maybe she had a gun. Maybe she was here to rob me. Really? In the middle of a hurricane? In the middle of a tsunami, she's going to rob you? But that's the story of people. So the Torah is showing you, it's not that the Jews participated only in the sin of the golden calf. It's that they didn't take a stand and say, this is wrong. I'm going with Moshe. And that's why the Levites were rewarded, because they did take a stand.
So in the Torah, when does the concept of Mashiach come? Like, how does that
how does that tie in?
Yeah, how does that circle in?
Okay, we'll go off a little bit on a tangent, but I'll explain it. What is Mashiach? People sometimes think that it's a Christian concept, and it's not a Jewish concept. Mashiach means savior. Redemption, Geula, means redemption. The world was created to be a perfect universe, like the Garden of Eden. Everyone's healthy. Everyone is happy. There's no pain. There's no suffering. There's no wars. There's unity. There's a realization that there's a God. All the things that make a world a good place, a kind place, an accepting place.
Like in times of the Torah, when the Jews took on the Torah from the Holy One.
Yes, when we had the temple in the early years, that was almost a utopian situation. Not totally, but yes. What happened was, with the downgrading of people's values and morals, like the world is today, the temple was destroyed. The temple being destroyed is a symbol of what the status of the world is. That's not an end to itself. It's not, the temple's destroyed, Mashiach is not here, because it's a reflection of the world. Holiness, light cannot exist in pure darkness. If you have a room and you refuse to put up the light switch, you remain in darkness. Darkness exists in a void. So Mashiach means that we bring back the world to the way it was meant to be. Peace, love, harmony, unity, health, joy, happiness, no slavery, no child trafficking, and everyone recognizing that there's a creator. That's Mashiach. Mashiach isn't some kind of, we're going to fly into a spaceship and land on a country. Mashiach is this world perfect. Think of yourself living on Old Orchard Drive in Weston, but life is absolutely perfect. Your only problem is, how many times are you going to go visit the temple in Israel? That's your only concern right now. So what Mashiach means is bringing the world back to the way it was meant to be. And the Rebbe said something so beautiful, that one mitzvah can tip the scale. One mitzvah. So if you feel, what do I have to do with this? Mashiach is for the rabbis, the Rebbitzins, the holy rollers. The religious Jews are going to bring Mashiach. No. Anybody, any person who tips the scale, that might be the one defining goodness that makes God realize we're ready. So that's why I always say carpe diem, seize every opportunity. Every opportunity comes your way, seize it. You know why? You never know if that lottery ticket will be your key to wealth. You never know if that act is going to be the one that brings us to where it's meant to be. It takes one step. So that's Mashiach. So people say, well, I don't want Mashiach. It's so weird. I like my life. No one's taking away your life. No one's taking away your mansion. No one's taking away your beautiful dresses and clothing and bags. It's going to be life on steroids, positive.
But how does that go with the Torah and the weekly studies and the parsha and the stories to live in then the times of Mashiach in that peaceful, healthy way?
Right. So Mashiach mentality, it's called.
Uh-huh.
It's what's the mentality of Mashiach, that when you study the Torah portion, right? What resonates with you? What in this Torah portion can you go home and say, this really makes my life better because I kind of can see things in a better light. And when you see things in a more positive, godly light, your life, whether you know it or not, is transformed. You don't even realize, tonight I'm giving a presentation for Circle of Friends to get a grant. And I think one of the points I have to impose upon them is that change doesn't happen in a second. It's a gradual thing. When you take teenagers and you give them the ability to give to others, it's not only they're giving to others and they're being a friend to somebody, a child, let's say with special needs, their lives become enhanced. You become a more accepting, giving, loving, open-minded person. And that enhances your life. So that's what it is. When you study a Torah portion,
that's what it is.
It's the little changes in your life. Like now, we spoke about silence. I'm not saying that I'm going to change your life, but I'm trying to say, even when I'm studying, I'm thinking to myself, how many times did I not want to get involved? I'm like, I'm not answering back. I don't want to get involved. Maybe I should have said something. So, the studying the Torah, you have to try to find something that resonates with you and will enhance your life and make your life better, in a sense. That's what it's about. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So that I think that's what it is, Yeah. So now going back, so that's why the Levites were given the gift of now working in the Beis Hamikdash and being the Kohanim and the Levites. That the three sons, Levi, Kahas, and Merari, were the ones working in the temple, and they were and then their children took over because they did not participate in the sin of the golden calf, and they took a stand against the sin of the golden calf. That was the trick. They stood up for Moshe, which is for God, because God sends Moshe down and say, go take care of this. So now comes to another interesting tidbit in the Torah portion, that there was something very interesting. Remember, they built the tabernacle, right? And in the tabernacle were all the vessels and the walls. Now, every time God said travel, right? They had to travel. Now, what do you do with everything? You have to start packing up. Once you finish camping, you have to pack up your tent and your little oven and your mattresses and everything. So there was a whole process of packing up to go. And it wasn't simple. So what happened? I'm going to read from the Torah portion. God would say to Aaron, who was the high priest, and say to him, let me get it out. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. Now it's time to travel again. Do not cause the tribe of the Kohanim to be cut off from the tribe of the Levites. What should you do? You should go into the holies of holies, he tells Aaron, and pack up the 5 main vessels. What were the 5 main vessels? The Aron, the ark that held the tablets and the Torah. The 2 altars, the gold altar and the copper altar. The table that held the 12 loaves of bread of challah, and the menorah, the beautiful 7-branch menorah. So what did Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, do with his son? He took 2 layers of special cloth. He wrapped each item in these 2 layers, and then the Levites were allowed to come and then carry them, and they were to put the poles on because they were heavy, and they would carry them from place to place. There was a process. So God is saying to Aaron, they're not allowed to touch these vessels. You have to wrap it. Once it's wrapped, they can come and take it. And the question is, because nothing in the Torah is superfluous, what are these 2 layers that they wrapped it in? Like when you have a moving truck, they wrap your expensive furniture with these thick cloths, right? So that if they bump it, you don't want them to scratch up your furniture, which they do anyway. But why? Why so much effort putting into this wrapping and double wrapping? And there's a beautiful, beautiful insight. And I'm going to share 2 insights. One, the simple insight, and then the deeper Kabbalistic insight given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So what were these 2 wrappings? So the outer wrapping, which means, the first wrapping was called the tchelis. Who knows what tchelis is? It's the blue turquoise wool dyed bright blue. Now, how do they dye this wool? They take this fish called the chilazon. It's in the Mediterranean. They dyed the wool, and they made tzitzit. Remember, there was a tchelis string on the tzitzit, on the talit. There was a blue string, and they also made a covering for the objects, which I just described, out of this blue dye. Now, what's the significance of this blue dye, the chilazon, which now we don't know what fish it is, so we can't make the blue dye, even though there was one great Rebbe who said he discovered this fish and he started to make blue threads for the tzitzit, but a lot of other rabbis said, no, it's not the real thing. We can't verify it. We're not using it. Because remember, you couldn't go to the fabric store and say to the fabric lady, I want chilazon fabric, turquoise tchelis from the chilazon. And she'll say, well, I'm out of it. I'm going to give you indigo, which is what we make jeans out of. No, 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 no. God said I can only use tchelis. I can't take that other fabric. So it had to be this fabric. Why? So the Torah explains that this blue dye, once you dyed the fabric with this blue dye from this fish called tchelis, that was the fabric, the wool fabric, you could never wash it out. No matter what you did, the color was indestructible. It didn't fade. It didn't wear out. It didn't wash out. It stayed forever. Now, many people wanted to sell the Jews the indigo fabric, and they deceived them, said, no, 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 this is from the chilazon. This fabric is from the chilazon. And they tried to deceive them, but they had a way to test it. They tested it, and when they tested it, they saw that it wasn't chilazon. It wasn't chilazon. Oops, I closed myself off for a second. So they knew that it was indigo, it was another fabric, but it wasn't chilazon. It wasn't the tchelis fabric. So it's a fabric that's virtually, the color is indestructible. Indigo, by the way, when you buy blue jeans, many people want to fade it. They want to give it that look, so they bleach it, they fade it, they wash it. They want to have that worn out look. The second layer was called tachash. It was a thick hide, very colorful. That was the outer layer. And remember we discussed what was the tachash? It was the unicorn. So when the Jews left Egypt and it was time to build the tabernacle, the Mishkan, God sent a unicorn. They were able to take the skin, and then the unicorn, the tachash, disappeared, never to be found again. So people say, yes, that people ask, is there such a thing as a unicorn? There was when they left Egypt and they were building the tabernacle. There was a...
Wow. I never heard of that. But,
So they had it. So they had it. So they had the unicorn, which is very, very interesting. So that's the second layer. So again, The question is, one second, I accidentally. The question is, why such intricate detail into what the layers? Who cares what the layers were? But the layers describe what exactly it meant to wrap these 5 special vessels in these layers. It defines how we view Torah, how we should view our relationship with Torah. So the first one, the fact they can never wash out the blue dye, the techeles, the thread, whether it's on tzitzis or it's on the covering, that is what the Torah is. That it can survive all times and places. It can survive war. It can survive persecution. It can survive everything and anything, because the Torah, again, is God's wisdom. It's infinite. It's eternal, just like the blue dye. So even when Jews, we were far flung, we were put into concentration camps, cremated, burnt, the Torah survived because it's like the chelas. The chelas. The second part, the colorful hide, say the commentaries, describes our view in life. You know, you have very colorful people all over the world. There's over millions of people all over the world with different opinions and different talents and different ideas. Although the world is made up with so many diverse people, including ourselves, the Jewish nation, like an orchestra, you have the violin and you have the flute and you have the piano and you have the harp and you have the cello and you have the drums. You have diversity, you have colors of the rainbow, but there's only one Torah that it covers. That just because there's a colorful world and people are so different, what this is telling us, the second covering, is that yes, you're all going to be different. God made you different. That's what makes the world go round. You have a talent in business and I have a talent in creativity. You have a talent in organization and I have a talent in building. We all have our talents and together we create a better world. But the colorfulness and the differences don't make the Torah change. The eternity of the Torah stays the same. What this is telling us is that the world is colorful, people are colorful and different, but the Torah is not different. Again, the same point. Do we adapt to Torah or does Torah adapt to us? Do we say, how could the Torah be for the same person living in Ethiopia, Jew, as a Jew in Israel? We're living in 2 different countries. We have different skin colors. We speak different languages. You mean to tell me the Torah could be good for the Ethiopian Jew and for the American Jew, for the Israeli Jew and for the Russian Jew? Absolutely not. Nothing is for everybody. But that's the mistake. The greatness of Torah is, and it is for every Jew. It doesn't matter if you grew up in Asia, or you grew up in Africa, or you grew up in Brooklyn, New York, or you grew up in Connecticut. The Torah is for every Jew. As colorful as we are, the Torah is even more colorful because its wisdom, its strength is that it's eternal for every time and every place, and has answers for every time and every place. They even had an answer when the female pilot went up to space and she wanted to know when to light Shabbos candles. You don't think God knew about the spaceship program? It's in the Torah. What about
a Jew?
What? Pardon?
He was a Jew, the astronaut?
He was a female. What was her name? Sally Ride? Was that the Jewish woman? One of the women astronauts asked a question. Was it Sally Ride? I can't remember her name. What about now with all the questions in medicine, infertility, how to do IVF, all that? The answer is in the Torah. So we evolve in society, but the Torah is for all times and all places. That's the colorfulness. So one covering shows the eternity. That blue dye, the techeles, can never be washed out. And the colorfulness is that the Torah is for every time and every place. And now let's look at it. Does anybody want to add anything or say anything? Sorry. Go ahead. And the next point that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gives a Kabbalistic viewpoint based on Hasidus, Jewish mysticism, which is part of Kabbalah, that the soul of every human being has two coverings. The soul is pure, godly, can never be, of course, ever disconnected. It can never be destroyed. It's infinite because it's part of God. But the human being, the soul, is put into a human being. And we're the human being, the body. So the first covering is the body. The body covers the soul. And the body has needs. I need to sleep. I need to eat. I want to do this. I want to do that. And there's a tug and pull between the body and the soul. And then there's even a deeper covering that covers the soul. And that's the negative inclination, the Yetzer Hara, that pulls us in different directions and says, life is colorful. Materialism is fun. It's exciting. It's exciting to do something that perhaps is against the Torah. After all, I have a desire for that. So the negative inclination is pulling us, covering the soul, and trying to pull us in a direction against the soul, against the Torah. It's covering over the soul. It's saying, life is so colorful. Why do you want to be stuck in the house on Shabbos and Yom Tov? Come on, let's take a drive. Let's go see a nice Broadway show. Let's have a nice cheeseburger. What are you sitting home and praying? How boring. So the evil inclination gets to us in a very colorful way. It's attractive. It makes things exciting. People think the evil inclination only tells you to do bad things, like kill someone, steal. No, the evil inclination also hides itself sometimes in a very dignified way. And says, you want to be sophisticated, this is the way you're sophisticated. You want to be eloquent, this is the way to be eloquent. And it goes against Torah at times. It gives you a very colorful perspective. So the Rebbe says there's two things that cover over our soul, cover over our holiness, cover over our spirituality and pull us. The body, which by nature wants mundane materialism because it's a body. And then you have even deeper the force within us, the negative inclination, the animalistic soul that pulls us in directions that go against godliness, go against what God wants for us. So these are the two coverings. One, on a more simple level, is explaining what Torah is. And the second one is saying that there's two coverings that cover over our soul, our vessels, and try to pull us in a different direction, not the direction we need to be. So now you're going to ask, why did God do this to us? Why give us two coverings over this beautiful, holy soul that pull us against the soul? That's the eternal question. So Hasidus explains that God gave us free choice. Our imperfection is our perfection. When we, who are being pulled in so many different directions, we're being pulled towards materialism, we're being pulled towards superficial activities, we're being pulled in every which way to follow things that go against Torah. When we come and we say, I'm going to take a stand, I'm not going to be silent in the face of transgression. I'm going to follow my godly soul. I'm not going to follow those things that tug and pull me away into every direction in life. Then that's the greatest joy and accomplishment for God and for the human being, because we are human. We are covered over by so many different things, and yet we choose the right path. We choose the path of godliness and Torah, kindness, compassion, goodness. We choose not to be silent when we see something negative happening. That's the greatest accomplishment. If we were angels, there'd be no tug and pull. They wouldn't be covered over our souls. We'd be perfect, like robots. You tell your robot to go vacuum your floors, like I have a little robot vac. You think it goes off on its own direction? It goes up and down and up and down. It doesn't do anything else. Did you expect it to do anything else? It's a robot. It does what it's programmed to. You push your button on your KitchenAid mixer. Is it now going to bake a cake? No, it's meant to mix. You turn on your computer. Your computer is not going to take a walk in the sunshine. Your computer is there to process data. Of course, it's doing what you tell it. It's a robot. It's a machine. The fact that we're human beings covered over by all these challenges and pulled right and left and left and right. And then we choose God, we choose Torah, we choose to take away those coverings and reveal the soul. That's our accomplishment. That's the greatest accomplishment. And that's God's greatest joy, because look at my imperfect people, how they chose perfection. How they chose to be kind and compassionate. How they chose to be a light unto the nations. How they chose to do the right thing. How they didn't follow every other person in the world that chose to go against Israel, to go against Jews, to hurt, to kill, to maim in the name of who knows what. Their religions, their fake religions. That is who we are as Jews. Every day we struggle. We struggle with this and we struggle with that. Should I choose this? Should I choose that? But when we make the decision, the right decision, and we take a stand, even though it's not popular with our friends and our neighbors and the local media, that is revealing the soul. And that's the covers. The covering on the vessel show us what our approach to life has to be and what we're up against. You know your challenges, you know what you could accomplish. When you're ready to play a game, a sports game against another team, you have to learn what are their weaknesses, what are their strengths. That's how you can win the game. So we identify in ourselves our weaknesses, our fallacies, and we work on it. That is the greatest victory.
And isn't that typical perhaps of all religions?
If you follow a proper religion, yes, it should. If a religion has validity, then God doesn't want, for example, a Christian to become a Jew. That's not what God is looking for. But if you're a Christian or Catholic and you believe in one God and you're following the 7 Noahide laws in your life, that's what God wants from you if you're not born Jewish or converting properly.
And if all mankind, human beings, do follow the path, then that would be the utopia that we want to have.
Yeah. By the way, being a decent human being, being a mensch, being kind, compassionate, and following the 7 Noahide laws, which means don't be, marriage, not to go out of your marriage, don't cheat on your spouse, set up courts of law, be kind to animals, and that means also don't eat live animals, honor your mother and father. What's the other 2? It'll come to me in a minute. Don't kill and don't steal. The 7 Noahide laws are basic humanity. It's like basic humanity.
And so, as
some
you
people
said,
have trouble following 7 Noahide laws.
Yeah.
Forget about being Jewish and following, close to 500 laws. Because remember, a lot of the laws in the Torah are for the Holy Temple, or if you're living in Israel during the whole time of the Holy Temple, if you're a Kohen, if you're a Levi, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, some laws don't apply to you or me because I'm not a Kohen, I'm not a doctor, I'm not living in Israel, I don't have a piece of our property in Israel on a farm. So a lot of the laws of the Torah for now are not applicable to us, even if we, follow everything.
But what I understand you saying is that when we all start to behave in a holy way and cherish what we have here, then this will be the Masonic time.
Yes, that's the mentality, the mentality of bringing the world to the way it's meant to be is trying your best to do the best you could do. That's basically it.
And we're heading towards that way.
Yes. We are?
I believe.
You know? So that's the story. So does anybody have any questions or comments? And if you want to share anything. So if not, remember Thursday night next week, you'll light the Yontif candles, Lahadak Ner Shel Yontif, Shechianu, and and during the class we'll discuss the Book of Ruth and the 10 Commandments of marriage or relationships, whatever wherever you're at in your life. So spread the word, invite your friends. We'll hear the reading of the 10 Commandments, which is one of the mitzvahs of Shavuos, which is read on Friday morning in the shul. We relive the giving and the receiving of the Torah every year at the holiday of Shavuos. God gives us the Torah anew. That's the power of the holiday of Shavuos. Every holiday has an energy. Each Passover has the energy of redemption, and Shavuos has the energy of receiving the Torah anew, like we never got it before, like a new gift, a new piece of jewelry that you got presented with.
That's the cyclical feeling of being a Jew and going through the